Hi everybody, Mrs. Byers here, and I am here to tell you about the Gupta Empire and India's Golden Age. We have talked about golden ages before, so we're going to think about what that meant and then tie it into what's happening in India with golden ages. Okay. So first thing we need to do is review a little bit from last quarter. What is a golden age? That's a pretty key term to know. This is one definition. We've talked a little bit about this before in one of our VCs. A golden age is a period in a culture. It is usually a result of peace and prosperity. This is a key term I want you to remember. It is often marked by a great output of the arts. So it's a time when cultural things flourish. Arts, sciences, medicines, literature, all these different kinds of things that all of a sudden it's like an explosion of these things and all sorts of new things start coming out of the society. If we think back, one of our first units was on the golden age of Islam and the Islamic Empire. And you might remember this graphic that it was the star with each point was a different achievement. And then you researched in a group all different kinds of, or one of the achievements, and then you learned about the other ones as we went. So we're doing something similar with India's golden age. You'll see similarities to what we're doing. But something I want to point out is that we do see an age of peace and prosperity with the golden age of Islam. We see a focus on international relations. So people are interacting with other peoples outside of their empire, and a focus on learning and education, and then this flourishing of the arts and sciences. We also talked about medieval Europe. Now, this isn't technically a golden age, but it has some of the same interesting elements that led to new arts and sciences. Okay, so if you'll remember right, this is what we related to a post-apocalypse society, that the Western Roman Empire collapsed. People were scattered all over the place. They were struggling. They're really just trying to survive. And out of that comes the feudal system, because people just need protection, right? Kings are trying to grab power. The people who are on top of the system are trying to grab power from all over the place. And the just normal people, the basic people, are just trying to survive. They want food and they want shelter and they want protection from other people attacking them. But then around 1000 CE, life had gotten easier. The weather warmed up, crops became more plentiful, there was more stability, people were happier and healthier. They started getting knowledge from the past and from other places around them. They started learning from what the Islamic Empire was learning. And this led to basic necessities being taken care of, and people can start to focus on those things that they're learning. So we saw a flourishing in all of those things as well. All right, so here's India. Let's talk about how this applies to India. Okay. All right, here's a map of the Gupta Empire. And so this pink part is where they ruled in the subcontinent. And all of these red lines, this is all trade routes. This is an important point because we talked about how during these times of peace and prosperity, there's also a really powerful element of interaction with other peoples. You can definitely see that they're doing that, because look at all these different places they're trading with. So not only are they getting goods from foreign places, but they're also getting ideas from foreign places, and that makes a big difference. Okay. All right, now just a note, guys, these slides are pretty dense with information. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because that would be boring, and it's not necessary. But after you've learned about this and come back to do some research for your project, these are a good place to come back and read more carefully. The parts that I have highlighted here are the parts we're going to talk about now, but I do encourage you to come back and look more closely at the rest. That's why I kept it in there, so that you have that resource. All right, so what we want to talk about is the Gupta rulers. You learned in an earlier lesson in the same module that this is an important dynasty because this is one of the first times that India is ruled by people from India. Okay, so not a group from outside, not some conquerors that come in from somewhere else, but this is Indian dynasty. So it's a powerful golden age, and it sets the stage for a lot of how the culture and the society is since then. Okay. So Gupta rulers brought about a golden age in ancient India. Music, literature, painting, dance, and sculpture thrived. But how did it happen? Well, first of all, the Gupta dynasty reigned from 320 to 540 CE. This is quite a bit earlier than what we were talking about in medieval Europe. It lines up pretty nicely with the Byzantine Empire and with the Islamic Empire as well. Okay. Chandragupta I started the dynasty, but we're mostly going to be talking about Chandragupta II, and we'll talk about that down here. So that is his grandson, 375 to 415 CE. His empire expanded through conquest, and remember that's important because that means that they're expanding and getting ideas from further and further out. It thrives under his rule. Art and architecture flourishes. There's another element to this in religion. The Guptas were faithful Hindus. Chandragupta, however, tolerated Buddhist and Jain religions. Okay, and that's important, and that's similar to the Islamic Empire, because even though the Islamic Empire was Muslim and they encouraged people to become Muslims, it wasn't required. And remember that Jews and Christians were called people of the book. And those people of the book were accepted as well because they were sort of I don't know if you want to call it like a sister religion, in that they were all monotheistic. They believed in the same God, and they were based on the same history, the same really far back history. And so they had some tolerance for other religions and other peoples, and that allowed them to learn from each other, and instead of to be warring and battling, to just work together, and then they start learning more. How did the government bring about economic prosperity? So on the other side, what's the economy look like? Gupta empires created strong governments. They were strong rulers. The peaceful rule brought about prosperity. Trade and farming thrived. So they have a good variety of foods. They have plenty of foods, which means people don't have to worry about eating. They can get to creative things. And trade, remember that exchange of ideas. So they're trading with Africa, Asia, and Middle Eastern merchants. The Gupta Empire profited from this foreign trade. And when you come back to this is a really interesting quote from a Chinese traveler who comes in and learns about the Indian Empire. And those are the things he has to say, which is kind of cool. What was the golden age of Chandragupta? So something mainly to talk about is that, and sort of back to the religion aspect of it, is that most learning occurred in religious schools. So the sciences and the arts and all these new things they're coming up with, they're in religious schools. There was a large monastery and school at Nalanda, which was Buddhist. Sometimes these are Buddhist, sometimes these are Hindu. So again, religion is tolerated either way. And people come all over to learn these things. This is similar to the monasteries and convents that started popping up in Europe. But remember, that's much later. Those are in the thousands when these really get established in Europe. But in India, we're seeing a similar thing, that these religious conclaves, these areas where people are living together and their focus is on learning, become where a lot of the learning comes out of. And these are sort of like universities, which is also what we saw in the Islamic Empire. Okay, all right, so on to some of the advancements that we see during the Golden Age. Mathematics, this is really cool stuff, because what we call Arabic numerals, these ones down here, and you can see how they sort of morphed and changed to what we have today. So these Arabic numerals, These are called Arabic numerals, but they're actually from India. They were developed in India. And then through trade, again, the idea was taken through Arabia and then into Europe eventually, and these other groups started using the Arabic numerals. They also came up with the idea of zero. They came up with a decimal system based on 10 digits, calculated the length of the year, and calculated the value of pi. There's a really good article about mathematics if you want to understand this a little bit more. But what basically happened is that it was very difficult to do big equations because the number system was pretty inefficient. So if you want to write 8,000 with Roman numerals, you have to write 8,000s. In Arabic, or in Arabic numerals, because they created the idea of zero and of place value, it only takes an 8,000, and the place value tells us that it means 8,000. You don't have to set out 8,000s. And so it became much more efficient, and then they could focus on really getting into some really neat things like the value of pi. Okay, literature. We also see a flourishing of literature. Indian writers worked in Sanskrit. They recorded fables and folk tales. Some of these you've heard of because they spread then to Persia, Egypt, Greece, and eventually all over. They became the basis for many later stories that are popular today, ones that you've probably heard of, like Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves and Aladdin and his magic lamp. Disney knows all about these, right? So if you've seen Disney movies, you know about Aladdin. Right. A really famous name and one that you should learn is Kalidasa. Kalidasa was a well-known Gupta poet and playwright, and he wrote a lot of different plays that were about emotions, about like eight basic emotions and how they interplay and interact in real life. Kalidasa was so important in Indian society, and really wrote quite a bit and spread out and was the basis for a lot of what we see today. I've heard Kalidasa called the Shakespeare of Sanskrit, which I think is kind of silly because Kalidasa came way before Shakespeare. So what we should be saying is that Shakespeare is the Kalidasa of English. But think of it that way. That might help you understand the import of Kalidasa. What types of art thrived during this golden age? Okay, so sculpture on stone temples. In terms of architecture, we see a lot more stone temples going up because this is also a time of flourishing religion and these temples. So we see the sculptures on the temples. Music was often heard in courts. There are famous murals that were found inside of cave temples. These are pretty neat. I'll show you an example. And creative dance. I'll show you an example of that as well. The creative dance is really interesting because each gesture, the gestures are sort of exaggerated gestures because they had a special meaning, each one of them. Here's an example of a sculpture. Okay, some more stonework from a temple. Example of the mural paintings, and think back to other murals that we saw like fresco in medieval Europe. This is a little earlier, but same idea. Okay, here's an example of a traditional dance, and this one is obviously modern because it's a photograph, but they're doing an ancient dance, a traditional dance. All right, what other advancements are we looking at? We talked about the stone temples and the fact that over time, the architects were building taller and taller structures. Most of these were temple towers. And I want you to think back to medieval Europe when we learned about Gothic architecture and how they were building things bigger and more grand. Same idea here, that the architecture is getting taller and bigger, more impressive. Okay. Metallurgy. Okay, so this would fall into like science and technology. Metallurgy is more difficult than it sounds, right? Because you have to understand how to take different elements like iron and copper, and mix them together to make something that is sturdy but also workable. This wrought iron pillar was made in honor of Chandragupta's father. So this is one of the things that we're talking about that is not from Chandragupta II's rule, but earlier than that. But it's really an amazing pillar because it still stands today and it is still not rusted. You can see it in Delhi, India. Right, advancements in medicine. Indian system of medicine is the oldest in the world. It's called Ayurveda, and this means knowledge of life. So they were interested in really taking each part of the body and understanding every element and piece to it. And they had some really interesting ideas about how to cure different ailments, and about doing surgery and things like that. Another thing I wanted to point out is that they also began vaccinating people against smallpox. We also saw that in the Islamic Empire. So people are really trying some really amazing advanced things that we're still working on today, right? So we hear a lot about vaccines lately. We can apply that idea quite a ways back. Right, your assignment. I'll show you a little bit more detail about this, but I just want to run through the basics. So I've provided resources for you so that you can learn more about these. You can also come back and go through the slides that I've given you. Remember, I didn't read it all to you, so there's a lot more information in there. And then you're going to do work with one advancement. Okay. These are assigned to you based on your last name. So if your last name is A through E, you'll focus on mathematics. If it's F through J, on literature, K through O, art, P through U, technology and metallurgy, which is also the sciences, V through Z, on medicine. Okay. Once you've you've found which achievement you should work on, and researched it, then your assignment, you get to choose what kind of assignment you want to do. And let me go out of this and I'll show you what those are. Walk you through those a little bit. So here's the assignment. There's a reminder of which one you're doing based on your last name, Alpha. Down at the bottom are the resources, and I'd like you to use at least 2. None of them are particularly long. Some of them are videos, some of them are articles, but really informative. And you'll see here too, this first one, this is the one that I highly recommend everybody read. It's a really clear article. It's broken up into different sections that are helpful to you. It has great pictures and really great information in that one. There are some that are specific to an achievement. So this one is about medicine. This one is about literature. Here's a math one. Okay, so you can sort of browse through those and see which one will help you the most. Once you've found your advancement and you've gone through your resources to learn about that advancement, then you get to choose how to show me what you know about those. So you can either do a magazine cover, so you click here and make a copy. And I've given you a template. You can use this, you can make your own. Just make sure that you fulfill these requirements that are written in here. Okay. The magazine name, you can be clever here. So name, this is your advancement from the golden age, so you can name it about, let's say your advancement is medicine. Name it about medicine, but you can make it clever if you want. You can make it a title that sounds like medicine, something related to it, but also like a modern magazine if you want. Make sure that you have some kind of picture that you know is relevant, not just a random picture, but something about your advancement. And then on magazines, you know, they have headlines scattered around the magazine. And so you'll do that, and these need to detail the facts and information about your advancement. That means dates, ruler at the time, specific examples of how the advancement impacts modern times. Now, I wrote here that you need to have at least 3. If you don't have 3, you definitely can't cover all of those things. I would recommend 5. But you can, I mean, sometimes you can fit all that stuff into one headline. So you decide, but make sure that you get all that information in there. Okay, all right, the next is the trading card. This is similar to the trading card that you did before, but based on Golden Age advancements. Okay. All right, you'll need a picture just like last time, the stats of your achievement, an example of it, a general description of the advancement, dates, and the ruler during the time. Then over here, specific examples of the advancement and 4 to 5 sentences of how it impacts modern times. Talk about where do we see this? So what happened after the Golden Age that then led us to where we are? So like comparing Kalidasa to Shakespeare is a modern time equivalent. Okay, all right, another is the movie poster. I love movies, so this one makes a lot of sense to me. There we go. Okay, your movie title is your achievement, so you can get clever here. Starring, instead of actors though, you're going to have examples of the achievement. The movie release date are the dates of the achievement. A movie synopsis, this is a brief description of your achievement. And movie review quotes, you know, they always have something like Roger Ebert says this is the best movie of the summer. But this would be 4 to 5 sentences about how it impacts modern times. The director is the ruler at the time, and don't forget to add a picture, a relevant picture. Okay. All right, then your last option, you can get really clever with this one and have a lot of fun, is a CD case. If you've never seen a CD case, it's just a case for holding your music album, like a record case or something too. And on the front, it has your album title. It would have a picture, the name of the band and the release date, but instead that will be the ruler at the time and the date of the achievement. And then on the back cover, it will usually have another picture. And then this is where you get a little bit creative and you can be clever with this, is 5 to 10 song tracks. But these song tracks are examples of the achievement and the relevant people are the artists. Okay, so an example of that would be if you were doing literature and the artist would be Kalidasa. Okay. Just an example, you might find something totally different than that. Then reviews from other musicians, 4 to 5 sentences about how the advancement impacts modern times. Okay, so that is your assignment. Remember, your achievement is based on your last name alpha. Your resources are all here. I don't expect you to go outside of any of this. Everything you need is in here. And then you choose only one. You do not need to do 4 assignments, right? You just choose one of these, the one that makes sense to you, the one that sounds the most fun. Okay. Right, and I think that's it, guys. Enjoy this, and what I want you to keep thinking about is just what we've been talking about, is golden ages. Okay, so different societies have different golden ages. What are the similarities? What do we see that's always the same when it comes to a golden age?